In or out on Kyle Pitts this year, Scott?
I'm out on Kyle Pitts. I know the vibes are better or whatever, but the vibes are also horrible in the sense that he hasn't looked the same off of injuries, off of surgery. You had Greg Cosell, who's like really clued in and like friends with a lot of coaches, talking about effort concerns, lack of effort that showed up to him on tape. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 7 times. Shame on me.
And I'll say earlier this offseason, I dropped the Chris Maloney Law & Order SVU meme regarding Kyle Pitts. He's only 24 years old, you sicko.
What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Which tight ends should fantasy drafters be targeting in their drafts in 2025? School of Scott podcast, Scott Barrett, Theo Greminger, joined today by Andrew Cooper of Fantasy Alarm. We're going to come out off the top rope with first question, Coop. I think this is a really important one. I'm sure you got a cool answer for it. Every single year, we see a sleeper tight end who's largely ignored by fantasy drafters hit in a major way. Last year, Jonnu Smith was drafted as a tight end 3, ends up having a phenomenal season in Miami, a career year for him, one of the best waiver wire additions, regardless of position, in any single format last year. 2 seasons back, Trey McBride was largely ignored by drafters, had a very quiet rookie season, and ended up being added on waiver wires early in the year, ends up being a almost league-winning value over the second half of the 2023 season. And then we go back to 2022. Evan Engram was drafted as the tight end 19, and he finished as the tight end 5 on the year, had a phenomenal end of the season. Who is a tight end this year that's being ignored by drafters, maybe a low-end tight end 2, tight end 3 in ADP that could hit in a major way?
So I'll tell you stopped a little too short there, because it's actually been 13 years based on my account where the tight end 18 or deeper has come from out that range to finish top 5 in fantasy football. And I'll tell you what, the guy going tight end 18 based on the ADP I'm seeing, Mr. Hunter Henry, he fits a lot of the criteria that we're going to talk about today. Yeah, I'm ready to argue.
You Boston area locals.
I'm ready to go to battle. I got a handful of late round tight ends that got upside, but I'm telling you, conditions are cruising.
Ryan Heath has been going to war with me over my ranking of Hunter Henry, saying it's way too low, saying he's the guy. I like that. I think that's spicy. You said it's been, 10 years since a tight end?
13. So going all the way back to Heath Miller in
What about Darren Waller in his breakout year, or Mark Andrews his sophomore year?
That was the same year. Yeah, Darren, you're on it. Keep going. You could probably name a bunch of them.
All right. Yeah.
There's a ton. Actually, it goes all the way back.
So Darren Waller, freak athlete, Hunter Henry, multiple surgeries, probably not a freak athlete. And what is he, 30 now? Sell me on Hunter Henry.
There's multiple ways to cook here, right? So ideally, we do want that speed, right? Ideally, like guys that run like a 4.5, 4.6, George Kittle, they can do more with less, right? Hunter Henry doesn't have that. He needs to have a Zach Ertz-esque season where he is getting over 100 targets, right? But all you really need to have top 5 upside is one of 2 things: 90 or more targets or 10 plus touchdowns. Every tight end going back to this one goes back to 2003, right? You go all the way back to Randy McMichael with the Dolphins. Every tight end over that span has had either 90 plus targets or 10 plus touchdowns to finish top 5. That's all you really need to get to. And I mean, Hunter Henry is a guy who last year led the team in targets 97, but he's also one of the best guys in the league versus man to man. And where that translates really well is to the red area, where, the defenses, they go lockdown one-on-one coverage. This guy last year, despite this team not going to the red zone a ton, I was a Patriots fan, and I'll tell you, we were not down at that end of the field very often. He came out and essentially he was top 5 in targets inside the 20. He had tied for second most targets inside the 10. This guy historically has been very good in that area of the field. So if he can stay healthy, which he has not been, and the offense takes a step forward, you've got Drake May, you've got Josh McDaniel, who has orchestrated some very good tight end seasons. Obviously, we're not talking about Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, but we're talking about literally some of the best tight end seasons all time in fantasy football. It's entirely possible that this guy is a top 2 target on the team and one of the focal points once again, especially in the area where the touchdowns are made. So this is a guy I'm definitely looking at as part of my yin and yang strategy, where if I wait, I take 2. That's a guy I'm taking him, and then I'll put the highest risk, highest reward guy on my bench.
What about you, Scott? Do you have a tight end that you think could hit massively at ADP?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't feel super convicted in any of these later round long shots who have like legitimate mid-range tight end 1 fantasy upside or better. I will give a shout, probably my lean more so than anyone. Jonnu Smith. We just took him in a recent FFPC draft, and I like that particularly there, the tight end premium. And this is mostly just vibes. Is like, there's no better feeling in the world than just being like totally alone on an island and having everyone against you telling you you're an idiot and then just being proven dead right. It's the best. And I've like been chasing that high where like sophomore year Lamar Jackson, I'm like, this guy's going to win MVP. You guys don't understand, potential future Hall of Famer. He's really good. You're an idiot. He was awful. He's a bust. And I've done that with like so many players over the years. And then being proven right is this amazing. And I look at Arthur Smith, the son of a billionaire, who is like basically just playing Madden with a real NFL team. Like, shout out to this guy. That is so cool.
His dad worked for FedEx. Owen FedEx, right? And was
a member of the Skull and Bones at Yale with George Bush and John Kerry.
And the first team to hire him played at FedEx Field. I wonder if that. Yeah, I wonder if that.
Hey, is there a little nepotism going on?
Maybe just a little bit.
And so, who is his guy? His guy was Jonnu Smith, where every single press conference he had to walk up to the podium and they're like, "You guys drafted Kyle Pitts top 5. Why aren't you giving Kyle Pitts more targets, more snaps? Why is Jonnu Smith on the field?" And every single week he's like, "You guys don't understand. Like, Jonnu Smith is really good." And they're like, "Yeah, okay, idiot." And like the fantasy community is like, "Idiot." And then what happens last year is like a new regime comes in, gets asked the same questions about Kyle Pitts. And it's kind of just like, guys, you don't understand. Like, Kyle Pitts kind of stinks, like lack of effort. He's not the same player post injury. And then what does Jonnu Smith do? He is Miami's number 1 receiver over the second half. Tyreek Hill, one of the best wide receivers of all time. It gets cucked by Jonnu Smith. Jalen Waddle, same thing. Jonnu Smith is putting up, mid-range wide receiver 1 numbers, going absolutely berserk. And then Jonnu Smith goes ahead and trades for his guy. I wouldn't be totally shocked if we see Jonnu as like he was last year with Miami, sort of like a PPR cheat code to some degree. I know it's a very run-heavy offense. I think more likely than not, this is a wasted pick and you're dropping him week 3. But just like the chances of that happening, I think they hate Pat Freiermuth. I remember when this trade was first announced, I was like, well, maybe Arthur is envisioning sort of like this could be Gronkowski, Hernandez, or this could be Ertz, Goddard. And then I looked at Pat Freiermuth's snap share in 2 tight end sets, and it was like 30% when Mecole Pruitt was healthy. I think he just hates Freiermuth, and like maybe John is the guy. But like I said, I think it's a super long shot where you're probably dropping him in week 4. There's not much there, but wouldn't be you're chasing upside in a tight end premium format. I like Jonnu.
Jonnu, I'll say Jonnu, it's a overcorrection by the fantasy community where when before the trade went down, he was being comfortably drafted in that like tight end 8, tight end 9, tight end 10 range. Now he's all the way down to tight end 21. I think when I adjusted my ranks at the tight end position, when the trade happened, I said, this is probably about tight end 15 level. But Coop, it's still just a very simple. He has a clear pathway to being the number 2 target on the team. Even if it's a lower volume pass attack, the bar is just a little bit lower for him to deliver for us in fantasy. And when it comes to Jonnu, like Scott said, Arthur Smith likes him a lot. He's vying for a new contract. And they're talking about, the beat reporters just talking about how versatile he is. They're going to use him on the outside. They're going to use him in the slot. He'll get a handful of carries. He's just a really interesting player, big time yak athlete. So like, I'm kind of with you, Scott. Like, we took him together, so I'm a little bit wish casting this. But Coop, your thoughts on Jonnu?
Yeah, well, with Jonnu, I'll tell you this. When you talk about top 2 target on the team, didn't he quietly have harder target competition coming up in Waddle and Tyreek Hill? Like, those guys are both hurt last year. Like, this year, when you're projecting it, I'd rather have him over here where they have Metcalf and kind of nothing in terms of wide receivers. Not to mention with Jonnu, like, if you just look at his slot snaps, it's not that good. But when you look at how much he played split end plus slot, he played a ton of wide receiver, like half of his snaps, right? So, but he's an athletic guy. Someone asked me, what's the difference between 2022 Mike Gesicki and Jonnu Smith last year? And the difference was that Jonnu Smith can actually break a tackle. He had 13 broken tackles just last year. Mike Gesicki has 14 over his entire 7-year career. That's the difference between these two players, is one guy can actually make things happen and the other guy is just catch and drop, catch and fall to the ground, right? The one barrier, and again, I don't even care about this whole idea that Aaron Rodgers doesn't throw to the tight end. He throws to whoever. He throws to Robert Tonyan when he has to. He threw to Jimmy Graham coming off a torn patella tendon. 90 targets. I mean, it's like he can make any player the guy if it's supposed to be the guy. The one barrier that we have to watch out for, and this is something that, to Scott's point, if we don't see it, we can drop him right away. So who cares? But Arthur Smith has never had one of his tight ends play more than 75% of the snaps on a season. So
I don't think that's true.
Going back to, because when he was the coordinator, when he was the tight end coach for the Titans, Delaney Walker never did.
Really? Well, Delaney didn't, but he had 4 straight seasons with 100 more targets, 4 straight seasons with 800 plus receiving yards.
Right. So he was productive on his role. So he was productive in the role. But again, if Johnny plays like Delaney, then that'd be great. Delaney Walker, another guy who had to wait like 7 years to get a decent role. But he does like to rotate. He is a former tight end. We run into this with the former tight end coaches that get the coordinator job, is they like to like tinker and rotate. Shane Waldron was one of the worst with that. So that's the only thing I worry about. But there's also nothing to say that he'll come out and do that again, because he really did build a team where Jonnu is the second best pass catcher, right? So maybe this is the time where he does get to finally lean into, all right, it's just going to be tight ends all the time, all over the place.
Well, I like that you brought up Delaney, because they're similar players to me as well, where coming out, they both have that same knock where it's like, oh, he's a tweener. I don't really see how this, he a little too small to be a tight. Jonnu 6'3", 248 pounds. Delaney Walker 6'2", 248 pounds. Jonnu in college and throughout his career, really good at creating yards after the catch, yards after contact, forcing missed tackles, which, was a little bit of Delaney Walker too. So I like that you brought that up, because that's how Arthur Smith got his start as that Titans tight end coach.
And I will add one name, and I really like your guys' calls on Jonnu and Hunter Henry, but both those guys are being drafted in a lot of leagues. For me, I'm going to go with a player that really is being overlooked in pretty much every home league. He's going to go undrafted. And even in leagues like the NFFC, he'll go undrafted. FFPC managers are having to cram in pretty much everybody with the tight end premium. But I'm loving the vibes with Jatavian Sanders. Right now, you can get him on Underdog and also FFPC as the tight end 27. Scott, you referenced the size of Jonnu Smith. This past offseason, Jatavian Sanders lost all this weight. He was playing in the 250s last year, got himself down to like the 238, 235 range. Really very lean right now. There was a lot of positive drumbeats in the offseason. Dave Canales talking him up as a potential breakout this year. And through 2 weeks of training camp, there was one of the beat reporters in the Charlotte Observer said that Jatavian Sanders has been the MVP of training camp. And Coop, when we start looking at Jatavian Sanders' profile, first pick in the 4th round in the 2024 draft. So he was one of the first tight ends off the board, certainly well behind Bowers, well behind Ben Sinnott, but still was one of the first tight ends selected, and played on a Texas team where there was like 9 NFL players among the skill position players. Played alongside guys like Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Jonathan Brooks, and he still had like 45 catches that year, had more catches than Jordan Whittington, who we've had a little bit positive buzz on for the Rams at the wide receiver position. And Sanders is a move tight end. And you talk about the pathway to potentially being a top 2 target on a team. Ted McMillan is going to be the number 1 target on Carolina. I think that's the way that the wheels are spinning. But these wide receivers could cannibalize each other. Jalen Coker, Adam Thielen, Xavier Legette. And Scott, you've talked about Rico Dowdle cannibalizing some of those Chuba Hubbard targets from last year. So there's a chance that when it's all said and done, JT Sanders is the number 2 target on the Carolina Panthers. I've mixed him in on a ton of best ball drafts. I'm starting to mix him in some redraft formats as well. It just feels like we're going to get 2 weeks into the season, maybe 1 week into the season, and Jatavian Sanders is going to be a player that's written about in all sorts of waiver wires. Your thoughts, Coop, on JT Sanders, and also Scott, like kind of how you saw him during his prospect time.
Well, I'll tell you this: losing all that weight, if I was his agent, the first thing I would do is I would set those cones up and say, let's run that 40 time again, right? Like if he's lost weight and he's quicker, that's the one knock I had on him, because on film, great. When he gets the ball in his hands, he's always looking to make something happen. My upside comps for him ended up being guys like Hunter Henry and Zach Ertz, because he's got everything except for the speed, right? That was the thing that we were missing. And again, the high end speed is the cherry on top to really have these crazy seasons like you get from Kittle. But again, in rooms like this, as you talked about, if the ball is potentially going to be spread around, this is where positional scarcity kind of matters the most, because those targets are more valuable for the tight ends, not just in tight end premium, for everything. Like 90 targets for a wide receiver is nothing. 90 targets for a tight end is everything. So when you're in those uncertain rooms, that's exactly the kind of guy I like going for. And he popped a couple times last year in games where Tommy Tremble was out.
Second half of the year too, which I like. It was backloaded production, not front loaded.
Yeah, Tommy Tremble also missed most of the offseason this year because he had back surgery. I'm not sure if he's back out on the field just yet, but hopefully Jatavian's done enough to kind of prove that he's the guy.
He's probably going to miss week 1.
Yeah, Tremble is not. He's not been a guy that I've been interested in. To me, he was more of like a hybrid fullback even type guy. I was really hoping they let Ian Thomas and him both walk this offseason when they had the chance, but at least they didn't go out and draft somebody. So yeah, Jatavian Sanders, I'm definitely higher than the industry on him.
Scott, your thoughts on JT Sanders?
Yeah, you asked about him as a prospect. I was really low on him as a prospect. As Coop knows, athleticism is so massively important for the tight end position. I gave him a 46th percentile SPORK score, which is my custom athleticism metric, really predictive to fantasy points. And we've only ever seen 2 tight ends earn a SPORK score below the 66th percentile to ever hit 750 receiving yards in a single season. It was Dalton Schultz and Jake Ferguson, who both barely cleared that mark. As far as his prospects this year, I like him as a DFS play week 1. I like him as, a stash for FFPC. I just think there's a really good chance we're all dropping him week 3. If not, yeah, he could be an amazing pick because, he did have a ton of receptions in college. But the stat I keep referencing was his last 4 games without Tremble. He had a 70% route share, 19% target share, 51 yards per game, 11 fantasy points per game. Tremble, in his 1 game without Sanders, 98% route share, 8 targets, 5 catches, 77 yards. But in games they played together, it was really a 50-50 committee. Sanders had only 1 more route. Tremble had only 1 more target. Tremble 4.1 fantasy points per game. Sanders 2.6 fantasy points per game. So basically they were dead. But when one of the guys is out, you see a non-committee, you see a workhorse tight end, let's say, and good productivity. So yeah, like I said, week 1 DFS target without Tremble. And maybe they just let him be the guy and Tremble takes a back seat. But I do think more likely than not, week 3, Tremble comes back. It's a committee. We're all dropping Sanders from our rosters.
Any sort of split there and you're in trouble.
Yeah,
100%. Because he needs the targets. This isn't a guy that can Tucker Craft his way with 60-yard touchdowns, right? Like on 70 targets. Like he needs the 90. So you're right. He does got to get that full-time role.
Coop, you crush it over at Fantasy Alarm. You're putting out a ton of content. What do you have going on this time of year?
Yeah, so we got the draft guide out, which includes all my content, the yin and yang tight end, which is, my own color-coded set of rankings that kind of, after the top few guys that have great ceilings and great floors, kind of separates them into, hey, these are some guys you can start early in the season and you can pair them up with high risk, high reward bench guy. That's the whole plan over there. So that's all available right now over at Fantasy Lime. You can even use promo code Cooper right now to get 25% off on that. So that's what we have going on now. Otherwise, I'm just putting out the radio shows and the takes that everyone loves to see and hear.
Yeah, so I'll give you a big shout out, Coop. One of my favorite people in the fantasy industry. We did a show last year every single week together, and have just gotten to know each other well. And you don't even bring this up. Like, you also were the FSWA writer of the year. You had the article of the year. You won several FSWA awards last year. Promote yourself. Take a second here on the School Scott podcast.
Sorry, that was last year, bro. It's already August. That's 2024. We got to win 2025. And you just said it all. So I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, and we appreciate you being with us. And if you're enjoying our discussion on the tight end position, make sure and go back. We recorded a quarterback episode with JJ Zachariason. We recorded a wide receiver episode with Rich Rebar, and we had Pat Carrain on for running back. So you can really get ready for your fantasy drafts with these 4 episodes. And Scott and I are going to load up the next few weeks, trying to drop 2 episodes a week right up into the season. And School of Scott will be here every single week in season as well, helping you crush your fantasy leagues. And if you want to subscribe to Fantasy Points, no better time now. The time we're recording this, we're 23 days away from the season. You can use the code Theo2025 to get yourself something off of any of the subscriptions we offer over at Fantasy Points. Check them out. So I get Jacob Gibbs in my DMs. Him and Ryan Heath are having an argument about Brock Bowers at ADP. Ryan Heath and Jacob Gibbs, some smart people having this argument. There's been some really strong takes on Bowers. Everybody loves Bowers, the talent. It's unquestioned. You ask everybody their dynasty tight end 1 overall, unless somebody wants to be like annoying or have a contrarian take, they're going to say Brock Bowers. He had one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen by a receiver, regardless of position. Breaks Puka Nakua's record for receptions, just otherworldly production for a tight end of his age. But now, Coop, it comes down to an opportunity cost. Just how good do we expect Brock Bowers to be heading into the season? Number 1 target on the team, but is that going to be worth enough? Your general vibes on Brock Bowers, and then we'll get some ADP decisions from you and Scott.
Yeah, I'll tell you, in that debate, I am skewing more towards the Ryan Heath side. I love both him and Jacob Gibbs. They do incredible work. But and what Ryan, the thing that Ryan's getting a lot of pushback on, but what he and I are both trying to do is kind of create awareness to the situation on what you're actually betting on, right? Because to draft a tight end in the 2nd round, and as Ryan has pointed out in some of his great articles over at Fantasy Points, in the top 4 rounds, you're essentially expecting this guy to be the tight end 1. Not just that, but in the 2nd round, you're basically betting on this player to have a top 10 all-time season at the position. And that might sound crazy to some, but it's really not that big of a reach. We're talking about 300 PPR points is basically going to put you there. The top all-time season for a tight end is 330 PPR points by Rob Gronkowski. So, and when you look at these wide receivers and running backs that go in the 1st and 2nd round, I mean, Jamar Chase last year had 400. CeeDee Lamb had 400. For me, I make a big list of guys that I think can truly be the number 1 flex player in all of fantasy football, which a tight end has obviously never done. I mean, that Rob Gronkowski season is not even in the top 100 flex seasons all time in fantasy football, right? So I'm looking for the number 1 flex player. Positional scarcity goes out the window to some degree when you're talking about a difference of 70 points, right? So for me, I'm drafting those guys before I take a look at a tight end and also before I take a look at a quarterback in a single quarterback league. And that list to me is just longer than where Brock Bowers goes. So I don't find myself taking him. Now, the flip side of the argument is obviously that if you think Brock Bowers is going to be better than he was last year, right, that where he can come out and have a Travis Kelce-esque season, 100 receptions, 1,300 yards, double-digit touchdowns, doesn't even have to be double-digit touchdowns, but that kind of season where he's putting up 317 PPR points, like the best season Kelce's ever had, then you think he's worth that. And when people say, hey, you know what, I think he's going to be that, then I say, okay, bet on it then, But if you're the one thing I push back is people saying, oh, I'll just draft him and I hope what he does last year is what he does. I mean, he was the flex player, in points per game last year, 35 in PPR. Like, he was obviously had a historical season for a rookie and he was the tight end 1. But in a lot of these years, the tight end 1 isn't worth the 2nd round pick. like Sam LaPorta's season, if you get a season like Sam LaPorta had when he was a tight end one, that's not a second round player. That would have been a bad second round pick that year. So you just got to know what you're betting on. You're betting on a very special season. It's entirely possible. I'm just not betting on it at pick like 18.
Okay, so I'm team Jacob Gibbs, and I'll say, Coop, the one thing you didn't mention was the quarterback upgrade. So we'll come back to you on that one after Scott. Scott Barrett, question for you: if Puka Nacua had tight end eligibility, where would he be? Where should he be going in PPR leagues? Because that's, I think, sort of the argument with Bowers is we saw this as in a bottom 8 offense, him putting up these sort of numbers. Now he gets a big quarterback upgrade. Why are we not treating him like we would a wide receiver who put up his sort of numbers in year one? Your thoughts?
Yeah, this is one I really struggled with. I really understand Ryan's argument where it's like you need him to be prime Travis Kelce, and that's a really high bar in order for him to pay off this ADP. If you look by the numbers, it's kind of like hard to get around that. I will just say I just think Brock Bowers is one of those freak outliers where you have to throw everything out. I had this tweet. I said, like, look at what Ladd McConkey did over his final 9 games, including the playoffs of his rookie season. It was either the best by a rookie wide receiver ever, or it was the best since Odell Beckham Jr. And then the follow-up tweet to that was like, okay, now imagine how good Brock Bowers is, because in college on the same team, Brock Bowers had 10 times as many 100-yard games. And so we got the volume right out of the gates from a Brock Bowers where you just throw out the tight end position, which is an advantage because tight end points go farther for your team than wide receiver points. You just throw that out, like most receptions by a rookie ever. He got there with elite volume, but we didn't really see the college Brock Bowers of him just continually housing 80-yard catch and runs. And I think there's a really good chance we see that this year with Jonnu Smith, who's much more accurate in the short to intermediate areas of the field, which is good for generating that yak. I am really on the fence here, so maybe you could sway me in one direction, Theo, but it's a cop out. I'm sort of even with ADP.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit ahead of ADP in PPR. We'll take it to a tight end premium, but you talk about like trying to identify that number one flex. So just to kind of let's go with an ADP decision, because a lot of times, as much as we want drafters to deviate away from ADP, draft the guys we're recommending, a lot of times I think drafters will lean into sort of the ADP tiers when they're OTC in like these big ESPN, Yahoo leagues, and even in NFFC type drafts. So this is where he's going alongside of, and let me give you an NFFC. So this is PPR start 3 wide receiver. Right now, Brock Bowers is going alongside Garrett Wilson, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor. Would you be more into one of the running backs there, Garrett Wilson, or would you be more into Bowers there in that sort of ADP range?
Yeah, so I do worry a little bit about I don't like taking guys with uncertainty in that range. I am a little worried about Garrett Wilson with the quarterback. When you look at like the Vegas odds on Justin Fields, like the book saying that every other quarterback, the lowest they have anyone is 3,200 yards, and Fields is set at 2,500. Like that is they're projecting Justin Fields to fail with those numbers. So I do worry about that, but like I would take Jonathan Taylor over, because I think Jonathan Taylor has an opportunity, like I said, to be the RB1. I mean, there's a whole list of guys, Josh Jacobs, Taylor, like there's a whole list of guys that could come out this year and just put up a crazy season. And when again, the bet remains the same in full PPR as it does in half PPR. The tight end premium as it does in PPR. The bet is still that he has an all-time season. You look at, again, if you just want to translate it, the seasons by Gronk, the seasons by Kelce, the tight end premium juices that up to like 370 points, right? Which, does make him a top 3 to 5 type guy if it's an all-time great season that he has. It's still not 400 points like Chase had last year, or 400 points like CeeDee Lamb had last year, which obviously I'm taking those guys before I would take a Brock Bowers. But if you truly believe that this guy is going to transcend and become prime Travis Kelce this year, then do that. If he does transcend and become prime Travis Kelce, he'll be 23 years old, and I'll have years and years and years where I will be also just with you, taking him in the first and second round in a bunch of drafts, and he will, just like Travis Kelce, that's where he'll go for many years probably. But for me, there's too many great in certain situations for me in that range in both tight end premium and regular drafts that I do take Brock Bowers once he falls to, the back end of the second round or the beginning of the third round. That's where I'm willing to pull that trigger. It means I don't get him that much.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that you're still gonna get him occasionally in that draft because there's certain leagues where people just don't value the tight end position. Scott, very quickly, your same OTC decision. Let's say you're in a start 3 wide receiver format. Let's say you're on the clock and it's Bowers, Taylor, Bucky Irving, Garrett Wilson. Where would you be at in a single PPR format?
So I will say, I don't think Garrett Wilson's in the conversation. The dude has finished top 7 in total targets outside of the top 30 in fantasy points per game in 3 straight seasons. Not super bullish on this setup with Justin Fields. Jonathan Taylor versus Bucky Irving is a tough decision for me. I have them neck and neck. I do have Jonathan Taylor a little ahead. I liked Coop's argument there. I think I would go Jonathan Taylor there.
Okay, so we'll stay with you on this one, Scott. When you factor in the tight end premium, occasionally we've had these unbelievable tight end scoring seasons in tight end premium. Coop, like we've drafted FFPC teams together. Scott, we've drafted FFPC teams together. You don't have to go back that far. The LaPorta season, not that impactful, but go back to the Travis Kelce seasons. A couple of those years, Kelce was scoring like elite quarterback numbers head to head when you're talking about 4-point passing touchdowns and the 1.5 tight end premium. So Scott, this is where you get into the opportunity cost question, but also a much harder on the clock decision. So I think I know which way you're going to go on this one, but I'm not sure. Brock Bowers versus Saquon Barkley versus Christian McCaffrey versus Malik Neighbors. And let's say it's a fully healthy Malik Neighbors. That's where we're at for an FFPC drafter. Where would Scott Barrett be at? Bowers, Barkley, CMC, Neighbors. And we're not even talking about like roster construction. We're talking about just head to head. Who do you prefer?
Yeah. So I would take Christian McCaffrey. And I've said this to you before, Theo. My best FFPC teams were punt tight end teams, believe it or not, where, one of the first FFPC leagues I ever did, I rode Charles Clay all the way to a top 25 overall finish. That was a silver bullet. That was my only team that year. And then 2019, I only drafted one team. It finished top 15. I waited till the double-digit rounds to take Mark Andrews. And I had the highest non-Christian McCaffrey team. And so I'm going to take Christian McCaffrey, the guy who, I get there's a ton of risk there. If he's hurt, I'm probably not winning anything. But if he's healthy, the last time he was fully healthy, he outscored all other running backs by over 100 fantasy points. That's a power law player. I would take Christian McCaffrey.
And Coop, your answer to this question, which one of these guys do you take ahead of?
I love it.
The fist bumps are out. I'm fully with you. So this is twice in about 3 days now where the McCaffrey bell has been rung. I have him ranked at 7 as well. Just this week at the Fantasy Football Expo, we did the Kings Classic draft, and JJ took him at 7 as well. Too many boos from the crowd, but I was over there doing the fist bump. So I'm in with you on that. And I'll tell you, it's like you mentioned, you said a couple years ago, Travis Kelce did it. 2022, Travis Kelce is the second highest all-time scoring tight end season in both PPR and tight end premium. And again, if people want, that's the thing about this game is if that's the bet you're making, I'm never going to say that's a bad bet. I'll tell you what the bet is, and I'll tell you whether I'm making it. But that's something that people got to decide on their own. And I love what Scott said about, the Charles Clay season is that last year I was able to take a team to top 250 in Best Ball Mania, and my only tight ends were Hunter Henry and Pat Freiermuth that I got a good value. Like
Wow.
you can kind of piece things together at the tight end position, and I'm actually contractually obligated to do it. So folks out there, if you love adding wide receivers or finding the breakout running back, or you think you're like the QB guru, lean into that a little bit. Like I lean into late round tight end because it's my job to post every week what's going on at that position. So it's a skill set that I have, and I encourage people to do the same with their drafts. I mean, don't force it, but if you can lean into things that you're good at, you absolutely should, because that's how you get an advantage. One of my buddies in my hometown league, he is so good at finding wide receivers, yet he drafts a million of them. He loads his bench with them, and then he just has a ton of wide receivers all year, and he comes in third every year. So, Alex, if you're listening, dude, start leaning into your late end wide receiver powers.
Get with it, Alex. And another thing that we're not factoring in that we didn't even discuss yet, guys, is Brock Bowers. Let's say he finishes as a tight end 1. Just how much higher scoring is he going to be than our tight end 2 and tight end 3? Trey McBride, George Kittle, also very appealing this year. Coop, your general thoughts on Trey McBride, who was awarded this massive contract this past season. On a points per game basis, McBride was nearly identical to Bowers. And when it comes to McBride, we know he's a mega target earner. I've said in the offseason, I think both of these players, both of them, are going to break Zach Ertz's record for receptions, Zach Ertz's record for targets this year. I think we're headed in that direction. Just how close do you view McBride to Bowers? Because in FFPC, it's I can get McBride towards the tail end of the first round. And in NFFC, I've actually drafted McBride in the beginning of the third round. Most of the time he's end of the second, but beginning of the third felt like an edge. Your thoughts on McBride this season?
Yeah, and McBride, I have 3 tight ends in my top tier. I think they're all great picks. I'm sure we'll get to the third one at one point. The thing with McBride, and I'll give a quick shout out to the Fantasy Points data suite, which I love. Sometimes I just go in there and just look at numbers all day. I don't even end up tweeting anything. I'm just combing through and seeing what's in there. It's a blast. But per the numbers there, everyone knows that Kyler Murray scrambles around a ton. But what they don't realize is that he's actually top 3 in the league in getting the ball out of his hands in under 2 seconds. He loves just taking that snap, and if McBride's there, boom, low-hanging fruit, get it right to him. My only concern is that they probably know that teams know that they're doing that, maybe giving up a little bit of that. They want to get Kyler through his read progressions and get the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. at the second level. Kyler actually was pretty good. I was looking at the numbers for him on the later developing plays. He was actually pretty accurate on those compared to other quarterbacks, but he just couldn't get to that level. The argument for him, though, is that he might just be that guy. That might just be like what he wants to do. The line really didn't get all that better. They didn't really change any of the pieces. They focused on the defense this year. So it might just be more of the same. So I do think that McBride, I also like Marvin Harrison Jr. because I think they're going to try and get him a little more involved. But I don't see a world where they just take McBride and go from giving him 150 targets to giving him less than 120 or 130. So he is easily one of the safest players out there. But I have a little trouble taking him towards that 2-3 swing because, like I said, I got this list of guys that I think can go out and have like all-time great seasons. And again, I'm plugging up my one tight end spot with a Trey McBride, and then I can't use the powers of adding them off waivers and stuff. I'm much more likely to draft tight ends early in leagues that have multiple flexes because I hate going bully tight end with only one flex spot. It really creates conundrums for you because then if you hit on the breakout running back or a breakout wide receiver, now you got to bench this other tight end you invested in. So just a little something strategy wise for everybody out there.
Yeah. So Scott, Trey McBride on Fantasy Points data dominated the tight end position, first read rate, target share. I mean, you name it. But one statistic that he really didn't deliver at and became sort of a running joke at times last season was a lack of touchdowns. So if I factor in, like Coop said, everything's going to be the same with McBride, but then we factor in just the positive touchdown regression for a player that we believe can score touchdowns. I don't think he's going to be just a PPR merchant. Then are you really bullish on him this year? Sort of your general vibes with him. Scott Barrett, not the biggest Kyler Murray fan.
No, certainly not. You're saying, yeah, we should for sure expect a regression to the mean in the touchdown department. I would ask a question back to you. Should we? Are you sure? Because 2021 in college, 90 catches, 1 touchdown reception. 2022, 29 catches, 1 touchdown. 2023, 81 catches, 3 touchdown receptions. Last year, 111 catches, 2 touchdown receptions. I just about always say this regresses to the mean, but we have this 4-season sample where the dude just doesn't score touchdowns. But again, I will say, I do believe this regresses to the mean. XTD versus actual touchdowns, that's one of the best regression to the mean stats. Trey McBride was very high in expected touchdowns. You really saw an effort, especially in the tail end of the season. So the usage was good near the end zone, inside the red zone. And despite his poor track record in this department, I do think it regresses to the mean. If XTD, expected touchdowns, were actual touchdowns last year, Trey McBride would have had one of the top 6 best fantasy seasons by a tight end over the past 15 years. So that would go a long way because, yeah, you look at what we saw from him otherwise. Week 12 on, Trey McBride had 62 catches. Jamar Chase was next closest with 54. Puka Nacua, 51. So this was one of the reasons why I'm okay maybe passing in a Brock Bowers, is just that small chance you could get a Trey McBride to fall back to you in round 2, because that's 62 catches, which 10 more than just about anyone else. That's pretty crazy. And remember, at the tight end position, these points go a farther way because, wide receivers score a lot of points, but the tight end position, there's really only 3 or 4 that you can count on for, I don't know what, mid-range wide receiver 3 production or better. And Trey McBride certainly among the best names there. What was your, did I just totally avoid your question outside of just to say,
no, I think you covered a lot of it. Both of you guys did. I'll say, like, I view McBride as a potential edge pick, but I also view him as a very safe pick, Coop, where
Right.
like I feel like it's a potentially avoiding landmines. Let me just give you both an OTC decision. And let's use NFFC for this one. Forget the tight end premium. So let's say Trey McBride, Josh Jacobs, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins. So a little bit behind Bowers. We won't even include him in the head-to-head decision. Again, McBride, Jacobs, JSN, Hill, Higgins. Coop, which way are you going in that direction?
I mean, I have every single one of those guys ranked ahead personally. For me, I'm taking Jacobs or JSN in that spot for sure. But the other guys, I'd probably end up going running back and wide receiver, and that's just a philosophy decision.
And Scott, for you?
I'm checking my rankings right now to make sure I'm honest. It was McBride,
JSN, Jacobs, and then Tyreek and Higgins. And Scott made an eloquent T. Higgins argument when we were talking about him with Rich Rebar. He views Higgins as sort of a potential regression guy. I think Scott and I are a little higher than Rich is on him.
I'll also admit that Tyreek Hill is very much a how am I feeling today?
Oh, yeah.
Or not pick, right?
Yeah, and it depends on the league, I think.
Yeah.
But Tyreek and T are the 2 guys I have ahead of Trey McBride from those names.
So let's pivot away from McBride and let's pivot away from Bowers. We go a little bit lower in ADP. And now if we had this discussion 6 weeks ago, we would have had a really big discount on this player. But George Kittle has been moving up and up and up as the summer moves along. I'm not even sure where he'll be by the time we get to main event season for FFPC and Las Vegas Live. He's settled in as a second round value in 350s in FFPC, also in FFPC main events. In NFFC, you're having to take him inside of the 4th round, usually early 4th, which is really high for a tight end 3. But Scott, you've talked about Kittle. It's sort of the opposite Kyler Murray for you. Kittle's one of your favorite players in the NFL. And when we talk about all these wide receiver injuries in San Francisco, we're trying to search for Ricky Pearsall, and I know you're high on him. Coop, you're not allowed to talk about non-tight ends till the last question, so none of that. Sure. And then, obviously Juwan Jennings if he's healthy. But Scott, why can't this be George Kittle's best season since 2018, based on the players around him, based on the contract they gave him, and based on the fact that he's just an absolute dog and he's really good at football?
No, that's absolutely the case. And this is why, you're giving me these names and I'm like, I love Bowers so much. I love McBride so much, but, give me this wide receiver, give me this running back. And part of it is because Kittle goes cheaper than all of them. And, who was the one who led the position in fantasy points per game last year? It was George Kittle. One of my favorite stats that I've tweeted out like 4 times and it just dies. Like most of my tweets get at least, I don't know, like 20 retweets and 100 faves. These just die. But I love this stat. It's if you exclude games with snow or heavy rain, so during the fantasy season, which is just weeks 1 through 17, Jamar Chase led all receivers in fantasy points per game. T. Higgins was second. Amon-Ra was third. Puka was fourth. George Kittle was fifth. He was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. Brock Bowers was not in the top 15. Trey McBride was not inside the top 25. And it was George Kittle putting up high-end fantasy wide receiver numbers. All I did there was just remove one horrific blizzard game, one horrific heavy rain game where, Brock Purdy sucked in that game, but so did the opposing quarterback, really did seem a little influent. Just 2 games, and you get him to high-end fantasy wide receiver 1. And we could argue that he's going to be even better this year. Why? Because no Brandon Ayuk until at least week 6, potentially week 10. No Deebo Samuel for the entirety of the season. And what have we seen from George Kittle when Deebo Samuel's not there? We see a demigod. Since 2020 in games, Deebo Samuel's played on fewer than 40% of the team snaps or sat out. And keep in mind, there's quite a large number of them because Deebo Samuel frequently hurt. Since 2020, within this sample, George Kittle averages 21.1 fantasy points per game. Ooh. When handling 66% of the team snaps or more. That's just to cover our asses for games George Kittle's injured because the dude is injured a lot. But he's also like Wolverine because he like plays through things that most people would miss like 8 games for. So 21.1 fantasy points per game. That is more than anyone but Jamar Chase last year. If you drop it to just 30% of the team snaps, it's 18.3 fantasy points per game, which would have ranked 6th among all wide receivers last year. So you could say I'm being a little heavy-handed or not at all. Either way, without Deebo Samuel, you're getting mid-range wide receiver 1 fantasy production or better. And this is my favorite player in the NFL. Like I have to make the Sig Bloom style argument. If you're someone who's just in one league, you can't justify a fantasy point subscription because it's a $20 buy and I'm just in one league, but like you love fantasy, you love watching the games and rooting for your guys. Is there anyone better to watch the games and root for than George Kittle, pancake blocking a defender, racking up, 35 yards after the catch, forcing 2 missed tackles with a stiff arm. So you have that going for you too. So yeah, I'm a big George Kittle fan and I think he's a great buy at current cost in fantasy drafts.
Yeah. To that point, I mean, I love if you're going to do a vibes-based team, just draft Lamar Jackson and George Kittle and enjoy
and
watching.
Travis Hunter.
And yeah, exactly. Just enjoy the fun, the explosiveness.
Hell yeah.
And I'll jump in. This is a good time for me to just share the ancillary items that I use to judge tight ends because George Kittle is the perfect example, right? It's talent, scheme, and opportunity. For opportunity, Theo has mentioned a million times, we want a guy who's a top 2 guy on the team, right? For talent, we want guys that can create for themselves versus man-to-man. That's Kittle. Guys that have a knack for scoring, right? Kittle. Guys that run real high A-dot routes, which Kittle, he does do a lot of the shorter stuff, but he runs he obviously in many of these years is up there 8, 9, 10-yard A-dot. Guys that run really fast, 4.5, 240. George Kittle, actually among the active players, only 2 tight ends have more than 7 plays of 40+ yards. Those are Travis Kelce and George Kittle, and they have 18. This is the only tight end that has multiple 70-yard touchdowns. He has an 80-yard touchdown. Part of that is the scheme he plays in. Part of it is that he's just a freak, and he's not only fast, but he can run guys over. It's like if Gronk ran a 4.52. That's what George Kittle is. And the last thing is scheme. I'll tell you, we're looking for guys that line up at wide receiver. He doesn't do that as much as some of the other guys, but he does it plenty. Be part of a high-volume offense. which we think they're going to have to throw a little bit more. They're not going to, but even with this guy, when in 2023, when they were a bottom 3 team in pass attempts, he was still a great fantasy player. So he's great there. Be part of a highly consolidated offense. That's one of the things we look for. And this team uses a fullback and a blocking tight end. 2 years ago, Kyle Juszczyk and Charlie Warner combined for over 800 snaps. That's more snaps than Brandon Ayuk played that year, more snaps than Deebo Samuel played. They combined for 20 targets. The more of those chunky guys, like those clunky guys you have on the field that don't ever touch the ball, the more the ball is going to go to the guys we want it to. The more they just paid Luke Farrell a ton of money to come out there and play a ton of snaps and never touch the ball. So it's a perfect setup for consolidation. And the last thing in scheme is that we want guys that block on less than 15% of their snaps. Not only has Kittle been getting better and better in this category, he's one of the few outliers that's ever finished top 5 while blocking on 15% of his snaps. Only 3 guys have ever done it since I've been doing this. Rob Gronkowski in a year that he caught 11 touchdowns in 11 games when he got hurt. Julius Thomas in a year that Peyton Manning threw 55 touchdown passes. And then George Kittle just doing what he typically does, like just doing his thing. And in the last few years, he's gotten that number under 10%. He checks every single box. And I didn't want to give spoilers earlier, but just like you, Scott, the reason I'm not going crazy taking Bowers and McBride is that I know that I can get this guy in a later round. And even if it has to be the 4th round, it's a cheaper round.
Yeah, it's so interesting, guys. And you guys both said so many amazing things about George Kittle. And it's a lot of times there's drafters who believe that you can't take a quarterback and a tight end in the first 6 rounds. It sort of kills your draft. There's a lot of high stakes managers that sort of adhere to that rule. And most years it's sort of a good rule not to double tap the one-off positions. But, you referenced the Sig Bloom reference there, Scott, where it's potentially this year I can draft the QB1 overall in round 3, and I can draft George Kittle in a lot of leagues in round 4, and he's got the pathway to the tight end 1 overall. I think it's a season where tight end scoring, I'm a little more bullish than some on the top end tight ends collectively. I think all 3 are going to be like 17 points per game this year. And I think George Kittle, it's almost like when we're filming a Mount Rushmore of fantasy tight ends, he gets there, but he's been unfortunate to start his career with Gronkowski playing and also having to play in so many peak Travis Kelce seasons that it's almost like a perfect storm this year where it's the handing of the torch over to the Bowers McBride tier. And we're going to get this one massive smash season from Kittle where Kelce is declining significantly. And you could just see Kittle have his tight end 1 overall season. So I think so many reasons to invest in George Kittle. Scott, anything else to add sort of after Coop and my comments?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I just remember that this is my podcast. It's called The School of Scott, so I can get on my soapbox. And I've talked about this on Twitter quite a few times, but I really think that there's an argument that a really compelling one that George Kittle is the most valuable offensive player, non-quarterback in football. I think he should have won Offensive Player of the Year last year. He didn't get a single vote. So shame on Dan Orlovsky, shame on all these voters. He ranked top 5 among all receivers in yards per route run. We talked about McBride, how good he is. Brock Bowers, how good he is. They didn't come close. They didn't come anywhere close. And George Kittle has led the position in yards per route run in 7 of the last 8 seasons. And so this is in part due, and he also leads all PFF tight ends in pass blocking grade, run blocking grade. So he just does it all. He really opens up the offense and what the 49ers want to do. And this is something, again, I've talked about a lot is how underrated the tight end position is. On the whole, in the aggregate, it's not a very valuable position. That it's a devalued position based on salary cap, and the NFL is right to devalue it, except at the polar extremes. At the highest end of the position, the elites, it is one of the most valuable positions in football. You see that with Kittle. You see that with Travis Kelce. And you saw it with Rob Gronkowski, who by my money was more valuable by far than any other receiver of his day, more than Antonio Brown, more than Julio Jones, more than Calvin Johnson, dare I say it. I believe it. You look at his number, like by career yards per target. I think he's like top 3 all receivers ever, something like that. And like no other tight end comes close. Excuse me. But you also see it in Tom Brady's numbers. I had this thread where Tom Brady's adjusted net yards per attempt was behind only with Rob Gronkowski. In games that Rob Gronkowski was active, he was behind only Aaron Rodgers all time in adjusted yards per attempt. In games without Rob Gronkowski, he falls immediately behind Alex Smith, behind Andy Dalton. The craziest stat I've ever found. So since 2010, so it was Tom Brady's final 13 seasons in the NFL. In games that Rob Gronkowski played, the Patriots averaged 30.8 points per game on offense. They had a .779 win percentage. In games without Gronkowski, that win percentage drops below 2/3, below .666, and points per game, 24.8. So the averaged 6 fewer points per game on offense. That is insane. Like you typically don't even see those splits when like your elite quarterback goes down and Tyrod Taylor's starting. And Vegas, what they would do when Rob Gronkowski was out, they would swing a line 3.5, 4 points. There was some article out there where they tracked it, and it was like only 3 or 4 quarterbacks above him. And then there wasn't a single non-quarterback moving lines to the degree that he was for another like 40 players, something crazy like that. And so, yeah, Rob Gronkowski, insanely underrated. And I just think George Kittle is the Rob Gronkowski of his day. And this is why he's one of my favorite players, in case you didn't know.
That was beautiful. My goodness. I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to listen to this all week, just over and over. Just waxing poetic about the greatest tight ends of all time and why the position matters. Couldn't be. I will say
I got nervous when they banned smelling salts, because that might have been his PED. He said he uses it before every play, but it sounds like you could bring your own smelling salts to games now. So we're
all
right. So we'll keep this thing going. So we got through the big 3, and I think really a lot of if you take away anything from Scott and Coop, the discussion we had about the big 3 is, should you be investing in the big 3 in your drafts? You heard sort of the bull case, the bear case, but there's a number of other tight ends that have been steamed up to decent ranges. So usually after Kittle goes, there is a waiting period before we hear tight end 4 selected, but you're starting to see a tier of players. Sam LaPorta, who's always been in this tier, used to be sort of a tier of his own for a lot of the summer, but TJ Hawkinson now is aided in his early season production with Jordan Addison set to miss 3 games on a suspension. Travis Kelce also getting a suspension boost with Rashee Rice set to handle who knows how many games suspension. Kelce sort of back in this range. So Coop, Sam LaPorta, TJ Hawkinson, Travis Kelce, if you had to pick one, which would it be?
So I'm going Kelce. I actually have him ranked. If I had to pick on the clock, I would pick him ahead of those guys. You don't typically have to, but the thing is with picking a tight end 4 or 5, I'm not picking a tight end 4 because I'm hoping he's tight end 4. If I'm going to actually pick a guy at tight end 4, it's because I think he could be tight end 1. And with some of these guys, like Sam LaPorta, for instance, you're hearing all this steam about Jamison Williams. Now he's going to get more touches. And Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't necessarily going to lose touches to the degree that he's now not getting 100. For me, I have a hard time looking at this Lions team and saying, yeah, Sam LaPorta is going to be a top 2 target on the team. He's going to get 100 balls thrown at him. He still is a guy that plays a lot of inline tight end and has to do inline tight end stuff. So it scares me there. And same with TJ Hawkinson. The crazy stat on that is that when you go back through the last 2 years, there's only been 1 game where TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, and Justin Jefferson all played more than 75% of the snaps. These ideas that they're really like thriving in full simultaneously this whole time has not really been the case. Like when Addison first came out, he was behind KJ Osborne, and then Justin Jefferson got hurt. And by that time this season, TJ Hawkinson was already hurt. And then the next year comes around and TJ Hawkinson misses a huge chunk of the year. He comes back. He's playing only like 40, 50% of the snaps. There's so many moving parts here between actually having all 3 of these guys healthy and playing when Addison gets back from his suspension. You've got a brand new quarterback that we've never seen, a quarterback that I like. But even then, it's like you really have to believe TJ Hawkinson or Sam LaPorta can push Addison and Jameson Williams for targets, because that's kind of how this works. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're betting on an anomaly season that we rarely see. Every once in a while, you will see a season where 3 guys all get over 100 catchable targets, but for the most part, you're not seeing that. And when that happens, it's very difficult to be a top 5 tight end. And again, if I take a tight end at 5 and he finishes exactly 5, that's not, I'm always in these early rounds, I'm always drafting players hoping they outperform where I take them. I'm not looking for duels and stalemates. Travis Kelce's a guy who, I know part of it was driven by injuries, but this guy still caught 97 balls, not 97 targets, caught 97 balls. I think he's going to be fairly involved. So of these 3, I would take him. I'm not even necessarily going crazy taking him either, but I really just don't love taking LaPorta or Hawkinson in that range. I would love to hear a case for it, though, because they always go in that range. They always go 4 and 5.
So it's for Kelce, it's just the sickest stat ever. It's 7 straight years with at least 93 catches. It's crazy. It's ridiculous, and the consistency is ridiculous. And it was either Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce leading Kansas City in receptions for, I don't even remember. I think it was like back to like Dwayne Bowe. So It's just craziness. I'll take the bull case. I'll say, if you tell me I can get Sam LaPorta alongside these 2 guys, I'm going to take Sam LaPorta. And again, I understand it because I'm also bullish on Jameson Williams. Amon-Ra St. Brown's not disappearing. And Jahmyr Gibbs is my number 3 ranked player in my recent top 100 update that just dropped at Fantasy Points today. So I get it. But when it comes to LaPorta, I've already seen him have 120 target season as a rookie. I've seen him have a tight end 1 overall season as a rookie. And it's sort of like and it's kind of sacrilege. You guys will hate this, but it's sort of a Kittle-esque talent where things could break his way and he could just have a massive season. And I'm getting him alongside a guy coming off an injury that I think I'm pushing up because of suspension, and a really old tight end in Kelce. So I'm not really hitting this range much in redraft, but in best ball, certainly LaPorta's been a guy I've been investing in. Scott, your take on this tier of tight ends?
Yeah, just to strengthen the pro LaPorta argument is, what did we see from him his rookie season? He led the position in total fantasy points. And then what did we see from him last year? It wasn't great, but in his defense, he was hurt for almost the entirety of the season. He dealt with a hamstring injury in August of training camp, and then he suffered an ankle sprain in week 3. First 11 games, really rough, 3.7 targets per game. But then over his final 6 games, 7.5 targets per game, 15.4 fantasy points per game, would have ranked top 3 at the position. You are hearing a great deal of hype regarding Jameson Williams, but you're hearing it for Sam LaPorta too. And we all know Ben Johnson was the slot obsessed play caller. Maybe he does take a little bit of a step back and we see more Jameson, more Gibbs, more LaPorta. But I will say, I think Coop's argument was the most persuasive. And although I'm not offended by Sam LaPorta's ADP, he's not a target for me. I am offended by TJ Hawkinson's ADP. I'm sort of worried that we see he's a little bit like this year's 2024 Mark Andrews. They're really hyping up the blocking tight end they just signed. We did see him take a big step back in snap share last year. And then Travis Kelce, just hard to get excited about him with Rashee Rice coming back and at his advanced age. So those are clear avoids. LaPorta is not an avoid. He's just not a target for me.
So Coop, we go a little bit further down in ADP. We go past this range and we're looking at Evan Engram, David Njoku, Mark Andrews, and an ascending Tyler Warren. Those 4 players are all going somewhat close to one another. And in FFPC drafts, to put this in perspective, you're having to use a high 7th round pick on all of these players. And occasionally these guys go inside around 6. Do you have a favorite of this group of 4 tight ends?
Yeah, then I'm glad we're using FFPC here, because the thing about best ball conversations is that it washes away a lot of the sins of inconsistency, and it really rewards like one big play and those type things. So FFPC, you really want to go for targets. It doesn't raise all guys equally. Guys like Tucker Kraft, obviously, if you only get 70 targets compared to someone like Travis Kelce who had 97 receptions, he doesn't get the bonus for the 10 in premium, right? These guys are all good in that range. I will say my concern with David Njoku is that everything is going to probably look good if Flacco starts, right? Like when Flacco's out there, just like every year with the Browns, it's like, they start the year, the weapons are doing well, but this is a team that Vegas says is going to win 4.5 games. And what do we see every year with this team when they get down the stretch and they have 3 or 4 wins? They open up that quarterback clown car and everybody gets one little game to go out and see what they can do. And then all of a sudden we see one game for Bailey Zappi and one game for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And let me tell you, the clown car is full this year with guys like Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. I just worry that down the stretch, when it matters most in every format, it could get really ugly. For me, Evan Engram is the guy I like best out of this group. Again, this is my favorite tight end of all time. I know yours.
Oh yeah, we talked so much about Evan Engram over the last few years. That's your guy, Coop.
Yeah, and we were, you know what? We were right when he got out of that scheme and he went to Doug Peterson's scheme and finally got to play big slot. He blew up and had the second most receptions a tight end has ever had, back-to-back top 5 seasons. Even last year, he was banged up. The first game of the season, he got hurt. In those games where he was healthy during the middle of the year, he had 7 PPR points at least in every single one of those games, which is a tremendous floor. Now he's going to play the Joker role. People are confused about what the Joker role means. Sean Payton just uses it to describe any guy that plays out of position. So if you have a running back that can go over and play slot, that's a Joker. If you have a tight end that can go play split end, that's a Joker. If you have a quarterback that can line up in the backfield and do all sorts of weird gadget stuff, that's Taysom Hill. That's a Joker, right? So for me, we know he's going to go play that Jimmy Graham tight end Joker role. They tried Lucas Kroll and Greg Dulcich and Devon Vele and Lil Jordan Humphrey, and it didn't work last year. They went out and got their big slot guy, and we know he's going to play that role because the moment they signed him, he tweeted a gif of the Joker. Like, he literally is showing us that he had the conversation with Sean Payton about what the role is. Unless he's just kind of throwing memes around, I think they probably told him what the role is going to be, and it couldn't be any better for fantasy. So it has me very excited about what the possibility for him could be. It kind of feels like Sean Payton is going and just collecting all the things that used to work for him and trying to run that back. Like, he's just combining the Michael Thomas slant guy as Cortland Sutton, the Jimmy Graham Joker tight end, RJ Harvey potentially, hopefully trying to be his best Alvin Kamara. And that intrigues me for fantasy. And this is a guy that I'm always rooting for anyway. So easy one for me.
Scott, your favorite in this tier: Warren, Njoku, Evan Engram, Mark Andrews.
It's David Njoku pretty easily, not just at cost, but just straight up.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting tier, and it's a Coop, like, to your Evan Engram argument. Scott, I like Njoku as well here. It's usually a tier that I'd be fading, Coop, but I think there's some interesting players here with good pathways to viability. I view Engram a little bit more as a floor play this year, where I don't think he'll mess you up, but I don't think it's necessarily the ceiling we saw in some of those crazy Jacksonville years. I'm with Scott. And I don't worry about the quarterback situation with Njoku. The thing I actually worry about a little bit is we don't know what Harold Fannon's role is going to be, but all these beat reporters are saying he's on the field a ton. Is that 12 personnel? Because Fannon's not this mauler blocker tight end. He's, on the contrary, he's way more slight than Njoku is. And is he a player that's going to not destroy Njoku, but take away enough targets from Njoku that it's going to be annoying? And Njoku ends up like, maybe the targets go down 15% on, like you said, an offense that might not be that great. Scott, do you care at all about Harold Fannin Jr. being on the field potentially with Njoku? Brett was kind of a little bit with me. It's not a great thing for him.
No, I agree. I think that's a concern. Because let's not forget, Harold Fannin Jr. Just set the college tight end record for receptions, receiving yards,
targets, I think, too.
Yeah, in a single season. Like, any tight end ever And so just the concern that he could be Cleveland's Isaiah Likely, like that would really hurt David Njoku's value. So I do think that's a concern. I think, weighing pros and cons, the cost, I would rather still bet on David Njoku than not. But yeah, it's not perfectly ideal for sure.
Yeah, now, a name needs. Oh, go ahead, Coop.
If I could say, like, I'm not necessarily worried about Fannin because, again, with Isaiah Likely, besides like last year where Andrews wasn't, was banged up, like he came in and that punished the ancillary wide receivers. I think that's kind of where this situation lives, is that like they have Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, and Harold Fannin come in, doesn't take Njoku out of the game. It takes a wide receiver out of the game, and I don't necessarily think it's really going to be that big of an impact for me. Like statistically, and I'm sure Scott, like when you look at the spreadsheets, when you go through fantasy points data suite and look at David Njoku, it's incredible because he's just an absolute focal point. He has crazy athleticism. And that's why for me, when I say the only thing I'm worried about is a quarterback, that really is how I'm splitting the hairs. It's a player that I like. He checks all the boxes. If you told me Joe Flacco is going to start 17 games, then where would we rank Njoku? Like tight end 4?
So I will say, I think preseason is going to be important for both these guys. Like I want to see, how they're using Njoku on the field in first team reps with like how many snaps does Fannin get? Where is he aligned? What's the usage? And it's the same thing for Evan Engram too, where I had this take like a month or so ago where, in my tight end podcast where I either gave like a pro argument or a con argument. And I gave a con argument for Evan Engram is that just like everyone's drooling over this Sean Payton Joker role. But I was saying his role with Doug Peterson is probably more valuable. Doug Peterson, since he came into the league, his offenses average more tight end receptions per season than any other offense in football, including the Travis Kelce Chiefs. And so that might have been a best possible scenario. Whereas you look at Sean Payton's history with the Joker, he called Greg Dulcich his Joker. Are we really getting excited about James Cook and Jeremy Shockey? Like really? I mean, Jimmy Graham for sure, but Jimmy Graham looked like, an all-time outlier. And so that was like my negative argument that I had a bunch of really smart people like, you should really back off on this. And so I have backed off on it, but yeah, it's like we've seen the last 2 years, like a really gross tight end committee. And so I want to see in preseason, Evan Engram with like an 80% route share. Like, I don't even care how many targets he gets. I want to see what that route share looks like. If it's high, he's a player I'm willing to move up. But right now I'm probably a little bit lower, certainly than you are.
Yeah. Greg Dulcich did get a chance. He got 8 targets week 2 and dropped 3 of them and got buried under the doghouse.
Yeah, but he also had like a 50% route share in preseason, and it was like 55% week 1.
It was,
unless I'm remembering.
It wasn't. No, you're right. It wasn't pure. Like he was doing like open trials. In fact, nobody on that team except Cortland Sutton was playing a full snap share. I mean, did anybody besides like Josh Reynolds very early in the year play more than 70% of the snaps in any game? Like it was open tryouts. They were rotating guys in and out. So you're right. The bet is that he gets a full-time role. It's entirely possible that they do kind of a Adam Trotman in line and he plays every once in a while. And then you basically just have fancy Cameron Brate. Like that's why these guys go where they go instead of going much earlier. Like if you could promise these things, right? Give me Flacco, 17 games Flacco, tight end 4. If you could promise me this guy was going to be the every down slot wide receiver for this offense, tight end 5. You know what I mean? Like if we had those things, it'd be so easy to move them up. And I think that's why a lot of people do opt for the safe but boring options of Sam LaPorta and TJ Hockenson. But I'm looking for exceptional upside.
I'm with you.
Well, the next tier of tight ends has some strong upside arguments to all of them. They're all younger and they're all going in sort of a similar tier. Tucker Kraft, Colston Loveland, Dalton Kincaid, and Jake Ferguson. Let's start with you, Scott, on this one. Who is your best bet in this range of tight end to deliver for us in fantasy? And I'm like 99% sure I know your answer on this.
Yeah, it's for sure Loveland for me.
Yeah, and expand on that, Scott.
I kind of don't want to. I feel like I've given away too much on the show already. My counsel is advising me to invoke the Fifth Amendment right against exposing too many of my Exodia players.
Well, there you go.
You just got paywalled.
I'll make one argument. For me, it's Loveland. I just took him today in an FFPC 350. Fell to me in a really good range. Scott and I would have liked to have selected him in our FFPC men event. He was taken about a round ahead of ADP. I just think that the thing I hate about Loveland is he's going in this great range, and the argument against Loveland is not talent. It's the target competition. And that sort of crutch, like drafters, it's like Loveland's a problem for the Bears wide receivers as much as the Bears wide receivers are going to be a problem for Loveland. And I think taking this player where he's going in a range where I can draft 2 tight ends, it's Loveland for me 9 times out of 10 with this range. And I can make bull cases for all of them. Ferguson, I'm probably the lowest on of this tier, but they all have the chance to easily be top 2 targets on their team. Loveland was a next level prospect, and I have bags and bags and bags of Loveland in Dynasty as well. Coop, your favorite of these 4?
Yeah, so Loveland's got, I had him as the tight end 1 in Dynasty this year. I'm actively trying to increase my percentages of him because I was worried about the target share before. I love what I'm hearing about him. He could just be a big wide receiver that we could start at tight end, Jordy Nelson that you plug in at tight end, which is always nice. For me, all year and actually still now, though, I'm still willing to go there on Dalton Kincaid. Cue the groans, right? Everybody, I know there's a lot of bad.
Brett Whitefield's on him. I'm not a Kincaid hater. Scott's the Kincaid fan, doubter, and hater.
So in my spreadsheets, I go and I anybody that's top 12 in a stat ends up green. It's all color coded. You know what I mean? And again, I have like 50 something fantasy relevant tight ends in there. So if you're top 10, 12, you end up green in there. And Dalton Kincaid was in the green last year on things we care about, like pass block percentage, average depth of target, yak per reception, wide receiver route percentage, yards per route run, screens, receptions versus man coverage, forced missed tackles. And again, some of those stats are even counting stats, which he missed multiple games. He had multiple knee injuries. I think that his knee health is something we absolutely need to track, because if he's not healthy when I'm drafting my big drafts in August, I can't go there. But if he's healthy, I'm not going to predict injuries. Like, this is still a guy who's in a very uncertain target pecking order. We don't know what Keon Coleman and Josh Palmer and Elijah Moore are going to do. Khalil Shakir is coming up with the high ankle sprain. And he's basically just kind of last year he was basically 2020 Cole Beasley, which is a fine player, but it's kind of a part-time slot type guy. So for me, I look at Kincaid and I say, you know what? Maybe he can become the guy that we thought he was going to be. I get all the downside arguments. They're all valid. So if anyone says they don't like Kincaid, I don't really fight, because there's so many downside arguments you can create. The rotation with Dawson Knox, the health issues, the fact that he just might not be the guy they thought he was, the fact that they do have a slot guy in Khalil Shakir that's very efficient. Like, there's so many ways you can push back on it. It's just, I look at the potential that this guy just ends up being an every down guy that plays like plays the Travis Kelce type role of just being in a slot all the time. But Colston Loveland could be that guy for Caleb Williams. So this is another interesting range. Kincaid, to me, I can't give up just yet.
Let's go lightning round here. In or out on Kyle Pitts this year, Scott?
So apparently, like, one of the world's best DFS players, a guy who won the Millie like 6 times in a row, he retired to promote a meme coin. And then like 4 days later, the meme coin immediately got rugged. And
I saw it.
Jake and I were in DMs like talking about it, and we came up with the Kyle Pitts meme coin. You'll get rugged 4 years in a row, and people still keep buying in. I'm out on Kyle Pitts. I know the vibes are good or better, whatever, but the vibes are also horrible in the sense that he hasn't looked the same off of injuries, off of surgery. You had Greg Cosell, who's like really clued in and like friends with a lot of coaches, talking about effort concerns, lack of effort that showed up to him on tape. And shout out to one of the Fantasy Point subscribers. We've gotten like amazing sources, and one of our subscribers, it was formerly next door neighbors with a current coach on the staff, and they were texting. He sent me the screenshot. He was like, "Hey, what do I do with Kyle Pitts? I have him in a dynasty league." And this coach said, I would never trust Kyle Pitts but this is the best he's looked since I've been there. Seems to get along really well with the quarterback, but then he also ended with the same way he started. But let me repeat, I would never trust Kyle Pitts. So you may see like the beat writers talking and like Twitter vibes being good. I still think vibes are pretty horrible. And this is, you can't fool me once. Shame on you. Fool me 7 times. Shame on me.
I'll say there was a TLC song about this years back. Don't go chasing waterfalls. That comes to mind. That's actually Coop's ringtone. You wouldn't know it. It's his ringtone. He goes around Boston. And I'll say earlier this offseason, I dropped the Chris Maloney Law and Order SVU meme regarding Kyle Pitts. He's only 24 years old. God damn it, you sicko. And that's sort of the argument for Pitts. He's only 24. So
that's the argument.
Repost that. That's good.
That's the only pro Kyle Pitts argument at this point. 24 years old, plays the tight end position. Coop, you're the whisperer.
I can make the case. I can make the case in Dynasty to hold on. That's it. In redraft, you can't, because here's the thing: the scheme that Zach Robinson runs, he wanted him to play inline tight end last year, the way that Tyler Higbee did with the Rams, and the way Liam Cohen used a similar scheme, the way he had Kate Otten operating, and he failed. Right, like down the stretch last year, Charlie Warner was outright playing more snaps because he was a more reliable blocker, and that's what they want. This year the vibes are what they are. They can tell me all they want that he's going to play wide receiver. They're saying that Darnell Mooney, is going to miss time with the shoulder issue, but in this scheme, I have a hard time chasing the upside. What we can hope for, though, is that he goes the Evan Engram path and he leaves in free agency, and his agent is smart enough to land him in a spot where they're going to use him kind of as their big slot type guy, as a wide receiver type role, the way that Evan Engram did when he left and he went to go play with Doug Peterson. The problem is Doug Peterson's not a coach anymore. If it was up to me, Doug Peterson and Chan Gailey and these guys, they would all be here using the big slot guys the way that we did for years there. But I don't know. I'm holding to see where he lands. Maybe he can land in Kansas City and end up being the next guy behind Travis Kelce. But as long as he's on that team in that scheme, I just have a hard time creating a scenario where the scheme creates the opportunity for this guy to go out and do what he did as a rookie, playing with Matt Ryan, who, like, say what you will about Matt Ryan never winning and those type things. This guy is like top 10 all time in virtually all the stats, right? Like he was able to create a lot of volume, he was the MVP of this league. So, maybe there's something to the good season with a very good quarterback.
Howie Roseman, Philly, that would be the only place I get excited about Kyle Pitts. He's from there. Go back there, be Dallas Goedert's replacement. You could just see it. So we spent way too long on Kyle Pitts. Let's keep moving, guys. This is a fun one. Scott, we'll go with you on this one. Brenton Strange, a Ryan Heath favorite tight end, Zach Ertz, and another Ryan Heath favorite tight end, Hunter Henry. I think Ryan Heath has driven the market, consolidated this tier. We'll call it the Ryan Heath tier. Brenton Strange, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry, pick one. This is when you're getting to home leagues. These are like the last few tight ends selected.
Yeah. I'm never drafting Zach Ertz, but I like him more than these names. And I just want to say I have a ton of respect for him. I mean, Hunter Henry's kind of the same thing, but he's just the ultimate replacement player, safety net tight end, where in my draft guide, I say there's only 3 tight end names you need to know about. And these are the tight ends, and you have to draft one of these. But if for some reason you miss out on all 3, there's always Zach Ertz or, Jatavian Sanders, who we talked about before, especially with Tremble likely to miss week 1. But yeah, Zach Ertz, you look at what he did last year, age 35. I know Debo's there now. That's not great. But he ranked 7th in targets, 6th in catches, tight end 7 in total fantasy points. Ben Sinnott had 5 targets on 311 snaps all year. From week 11 on, 13.5 fantasy points per game. That would have been the tight end 4. He was clearly the team's number 2 receiver. Only 2 fewer targets than Terry McLaurin, which from week 10 on, including the playoffs, McLaurin only had 0.7 more targets per game. That's insane. And yes, he's 35 years old, but in his literal last game, He had 16 targets, 11 catches, 104 yards in the playoffs. This is Kingsbury's guy. I'm never drafting him, but like your break glass in case of emergencies, like high floor, reliable low end tight end one, that's Zach Ertz all day.
And Coop, you're Hunter Henry all day long over this tier.
Yeah, for sure. Hunter Henry again, the Zach Ertz arguments are exactly what they are. I mean, this guy is quietly over the last 3 years, he's like tight end 7 or 6 in targets per game, averaging 6 targets a game. Kingsbury likes him, so he's a good Ertz is a guy I like in DFS because sometimes he's just free. And you know what I mean? Like sometimes he's like $3,000 for no reason, and you can just throw him in there and he gets 8 targets, or scores a touchdown. So I like him there. With Brenton Strange, I understand the argument. I say this to a lot of people. It's like, why draft Dallas Goedert if you could just take Brenton Strange? Because I think they're about similar type guys. But the thing with Goddard is you always need one of the wide receivers to be out to get upside out of him. When a wide receiver's out, he's great. When a wide receiver's playing, he's not. And that's kind of what Cade Otton was last year for Liam Cohen, where it was like, yeah, we're going to focus on the wide receivers. When one of those guys is out, we'll give Otton 7, 8 targets. Brenton Strange, to me, if you're truly a Travis Hunter hater and fader, then you can be in there. But Brian Thomas Jr., in my opinion, is going to lead that team in targets, and Travis Hunter is going to be second. And that leaves Strange as the inline tight end that is kind of, 3-4 target guy waiting for somebody to get hurt. And we know he's going to play inline tight end because that's the scheme. And that's why they got rid of Evan Engram and Christian Kirk, is they're going to put a wide receiver in the slot. That's how they do it. They did it with Chris Godwin. They did it with Cooper Kupp. So, but Strange is just not super exciting. With all 3 of these guys, what I'm doing is if I wait and just completely punt tight end and go yin and yang tight end, I pick one of these guys to start for me week 1 because I know they offer a floor, and that gives me the chance to put the highest risk, highest reward guy on the bench. If you want to draft Kyle Pitts just to see what it looks like without having to put him in your lineup, you can take Zach Ertz or Hunter Henry and Kyle Pitts and have a shot at upside. And if Kyle Pitts doesn't hit week 1, his role isn't good, you just drop him, just like everybody else that you drop in that range.
Lightning round on this one. Let's start with you, Coop. Favorite non-Loveland Warren rookie tight end in this class? You can take it redraft, you can take it dynasty, however you want to take this question.
Well, why don't I just take it to a spot that you know and love, a guy that Elijah Arroyo. I mean, the conditions that were created for Jonnu Smith last year to break out, let's look at it. Highly consolidated offense because of the fullback usage, right? With Alec Ingold and the blocking tight end, Julian Hill. That's what they're going to do. AJ Barner is going to be your blocking tight end. This kid, Robbie Oots with the mullet, is going to be the fullback. Love to see it. And then what happened is wide receivers got banged up, and all of a sudden this guy was a top 2 target on the team. You got a guy, Cooper Kupp, a absolute fan favorite Rams Hall of Famer player. They said, we can't deal with the injuries anymore, so we're going to move on from you. I mean, talk about a window into being a top 2 target. It's right there. So a guy like Arroyo is once Noah Fant got cut, I moved him ahead of Terrence Ferguson and all those other guys. He was already right there kind of anyway for me. So very excited about it.
Yeah, pack your bags on Elijah Arroyo now. I think there's a small window because of, there's this AJ Barner love going around. Barner's a dude. We saw what Barner did at Michigan when he played alongside a Elijah Arroyo-esque athlete next to Colston Loveland. Barner's a blocker. Like
Scott, what's the Spork score on AJ Barner? He ran like a 4.8.
AJ Barn Burner.
My best comparable player for the barn burner is Durham Smythe.
Yeah, he's a poor man's Durham Smythe, if anything.
Yeah, which we've seen Durham Smythe in this role as the blocking tight end in Miami, and it was fine. You know what I mean? Like, he'll have a role. It's not going to be a fantasy relevant role, but it's going to be one that helps Elijah Arroyo, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's Arroyo. Arroyo's the fantasy friendly player, and I think at the end, when we talk about dynasty tight end rankings, we could get to week 8, week 10. And I think Elijah Arroyo could be like the tight end 8. I think his ascension could be rapid. So, Arroyo's that guy. And then you talk about Cooper Kupp. There's a scenario where Cooper Kupp misses time in the second half of the season, and that coincides with the Arroyo breakout. And you're talking about like a number 2 target on Seattle. He's sort of like a big wide receiver, tore up the Senior Bowl. Scott, make an Arroyo take here.
So I completely agree. I think this is the right answer. One note I'll add is Brett Whitefield was obsessed with this guy. I will also note that, I was doing my annual post-draft presser review. The way John Schneider talked about this guy, it's like he was talking about Kyle Pitts, before him being a bust, like drafting him top 5 overall. He said, this is a player who you can align or we had scouts wondering if we could start him at X. He said, someone asked like, well, are you worried about the injuries? He's like, no, that's why we're taking him where we're taking him instead of top 15 overall, is because he had these injuries. This is a special player. But I will keep up for Terrence Ferguson just to make it a little more interesting here and give you another name, particularly for tight end premium drafts. Back to the press conference, Sean McVay said we would have taken him round 1 if it wasn't for that Godfather offer from the Falcons that we couldn't pass up. And this is a note from Ryan Heath, is that the Sean McVay offenses, like you're like 30% or 30 times more likely to find a league winning player than an average play caller. It's just, we've seen so many massive ADP beaters from this offense. And then another note from Coach Speak Index is that McVay is continually talking about playing more 12 personnel this year than in years past. They're usually at like 90% plus 11 and having a more tight end centric offense this year. So super late round pick in tight end premium. I do prefer Arroyo for sure. But Ferguson, a name to know.
Coop, very quickly, if a backup tight end were to go in this year, a non-Isaiah likely answer here, sort of your favorite backup tight end fantasy-wise.
Yeah, so I know Ben Sannett's been a popular answer, that he did play some big slot last year when Ertz went down, but I just want to make sure people are aware of a name with Elijah Higgins as a guy that was a converted wide receiver.
Hollywood Higgins?
Yes, converted wide receiver that became a tight end for the Cardinals. When McBride missed a game last year, he went out there and played that role. He didn't really put anything on the board, but I'm hearing good things about him right now. And they really didn't go out and load up at wide receiver over there behind him. Like, if Trey McBride goes down, do they really just funnel all those targets to Michael Wilson or Greg Dortch or whoever over there? I think that their game plan here is to have Tip Ryman as the inline blocking tight end. And if something happens to McBride, they're going to tap this guy, and he's going to go out and play that role. And, quietly last year, he caught just as many touchdowns as Trey McBride did. So
that is an elite answer. I was not expecting that. That is a plus answer, but Theo, you tell me whose answer is better. My answer to that question, who I might prefer to Isaiah Likely, probably not, but Mike Gesicki, over his last 6 games last year with T. Higgins out or on the injury report, 68% route share, 8.8 targets per game, 74.7 yards per game, 16.1 fantasy points per game. That's not just, better than Brock Bowers numbers. That's mid-range fantasy wide receiver 1 production, where T. Higgins is out, hurt. He's now the number 2 in a Joe Burrow offense, which we know is super valuable.
Oh, I didn't know we could pick a wide receiver injury. You rug pulled me on that one, dude. That's a great pick. I didn't even think of it to go that way, to go like, oh yeah, he's the handcuff for T. Higgins.
No one is. No, he goes like 5 rounds later than Isaiah Likely and tight end premium best ball.
That's the game, is that, so many times that's the catalyst that triggers these guys to come out of nowhere. I mean, even Brock Bowers, you got to remember, Brock Bowers was obviously very good, but they traded away a guy that has gotten 10 targets a game for 7 years. Like, that was obviously part of the equation there. So you got to ask yourself, go through these depth charts and say, if this happens, what happens next? That's a good call with Gesicki.
They're both really, really good answers. I think that you both had really good takeaways there. Higgins is certainly a deep name. Coop, you love sneaking in a deep tight end, and you are the tight end whisperer. You crushed it on this one. I highly recommend
all the best dynasty leagues are tight end premium. If your dynasty league isn't, make sure you do some of that. So Higgins is a great name. I love that.
Yeah, Higgins, certainly not a slow tight end either. We're talking about athleticism. I think he's like a 4.5 flat guy. So definitely one. Coop, you crushed it on the show. We went super long. Really appreciate your time and your takes. Scott and I are asking every single analyst we have on the School of Scott, and I'm asking on Fantasy Football Daily as well. Give us a bold prediction for the 2025 season. And I'm going to be dropping my bold predictions article on Fantasy Points. That should be coming out. You see all my Galaxy Brain takes, but where's your head at on this one, Coop?
It's easy, dude. Stone Smart, tight end 1.
Come on, man.
I'm just kidding. but maybe. Now, I'll give you one here that people hate, because even if they enjoyed the show, now they can hate me at the end. I know a lot of the statistics point towards Josh Downs being awesome. I have him in a ton of dynasty leagues. I think he's awesome. I think he transcends to playing in two wide receiver sets at some point. At least I hope he does. But there's a guy on the team who's the captain of the team, who's led the team in targets every single year, even when he had a broken back last year, and that's Michael Pittman. And I think there's a real possibility that this year Michael Pittman comes out and gets back to being that target monster and potentially finishes as high as a wide receiver 1. He was wide receiver 13 playing with Gardner Minshew. Now we're hoping he gets a little quarterback upgrade in Daniel Jones. Don't be surprised if the guy they paid a ton of money to be an every single down player comes out and plays well. So Michael Pittman, going off the board at like wide receiver 45, 50, that's an easy smash for me, one of my highest rostered players.
You've been on the Michael Pittman train for a while this summer. I know you shared it earlier on a podcast. So really, really like that. And I know you have a ton of exposure to him. So hope that works out well for you. I thought at first it was going to be a pro Josh Downs take, but you pulled the rug there. Really professional job by you, Coop. And I'll say Scott Barrett's 2025 fantasy draft guide is out at Fantasy Points. It's about a week old. Scott's going to update that right up until kickoff. Highly recommend that article. It's sort of worth the price of admission when it comes to a Fantasy Point subscription, but you're also going to get so much more out of your Fantasy Point sub. Use the code Theo2025. Get yourself something off a Fantasy Point subscription. It's really going to help you win your league this season. Make sure you're checking out Fantasy Football Daily. I'm dropping multiple episodes a week. Just had Mike Leone on. Ben Gretsch is going to join Scott and I as our next guest right here on School of Scott. Dynasty Life just had Hayden Winks on. We are rolling here at Fantasy Points. We're going to see you soon.